Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. If you've ever felt torn between your spiritual calling and your worldly ambitions, this week's guest is proof that you don't have to choose one or the other. Lauren Lamore is a rare kind of guide, someone who seamlessly blends spiritual insight with sharp business acumen and deep psychological understanding. She's a seasoned entrepreneur, spiritual teacher, and master healer with degrees in economics and mental health counseling. She's also the founder of Courageous Souls Rising Academy and Sacred Habits, and co-founder of the Millions Meditating Project. Today, she's sharing the 10 books that have shaped not just her thinking, but the very fabric of her life's work. Lauren Lamore, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. It's wonderful to be with you today.
So you've got a very, very interesting list there with many books that I particularly am very fond of. Tell me first, how challenging was it for you to have to distill the list of books down to just 10?
It was very challenging. I was surprised at that. And then listening to some of your other guests, I saw I wasn't alone in that process. You know, they're almost like your children, so intimately connected to your life. It was difficult to cut some, but I did. But also it was just a wonderful experience to revisit the whole process and my life in general.
Did you learn anything from the experience?
I did. As I was looking through the threads of each book, and I really saw the synchronicity and the perfection, really, of when each book showed up in my life, why and how. And at the end of the whole process, I really did feel guided. And it was a good feeling.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How, you know, we don't realize till after the event that there was a big plan. You know, there had to have been a big plan because the way the books come into our lives just when we need them. Yeah.
And I love that you have so much evidence to that. You've collected such a large archive, right? And you're hearing this story over and over again. I mean, that's just a beautiful.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yes, it is evidence. Absolutely, it is evidence. Yeah. I keep finding out things about this book club that I didn't know it could do.
It's wonderful.
So let's talk about your first book, the first book on your list. And I don't know if your list is in chronological order as you read them or just as they came to you.
As they came to me.
Came to you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is, of course, a timeless spiritual classic, The Prophet, Khalil Gibran, published originally in 1923. When did that book come into your life and how?
That book came into my life when I was in high school and actually working in my high school job, which I laugh at this, but, you know, at a grocery store. And one of the deli managers, who was older than me, he was probably in his late 20s, was really sort of a philosopher of sorts. And he used to share, and he became a mentor of mine. And he began to share this sort of wisdom, which for some reason I was sort of soaking up. And he gave me my first copy of this book and said, I think this will serve you. But as it turns out, my grandmother had been quoting from that book, you know, my whole life. And I didn't realize that that's where, you know, she was she was getting it.
It's an amazing book, isn't it? It does consistently appear in our top 10 choices. Yeah,
believe it.
Everybody seems to love it. So book number 2, this is a book that's very dear to my heart. It's profoundly moving. Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, which was published, I think, in 1946, and then the English edition came out in 1959. To read that story is just, I don't think there are any words to describe what people feel.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a powerful, powerful book. That came to me in college, and it's stayed with me ever since, but interestingly, I just had an experience over the weekend leading a global meditation with another organization I'm involved with, Enacting Peace. And there was a rabbi who joined us from Israel. And she spoke live time about how she was experiencing, some of this hardship, running, she and her children, between bomb shelter to bomb shelter. In the moment, she literally said to us, I may have to run to a shelter. But she spoke about a lot of the same, ideas that Viktor Frankl shares in the book about, purpose and what her purpose was and why she's here and what she's doing and how she's moving through this difficult experience. It was quite profound. And I was
it's the kind of book that you have to stop afterwards and take some time to process and think about. One of the things that stood out for me was when he said, if you can find your why, you'll find a meaning in your life.
Yeah, I really believe that. And I really believe that's why we're here.
What made you read it in the first place? I mean, were friends reading it?
No, it was college. We had to read it.
Part of the curriculum.
Yep, part of our curriculum. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So book 3, Embraced by the Light, by Betty J. Eady, published in 1994. In a way, this book was a little bit of a signpost for you on your spiritual journey.
It was. And at the time, it was such a gift to receive the book. We had just lost my grandmother, and I really hadn't started on my spiritual journey or awakening or understanding at all. And somewhat friend in the family who actually was psychic, but we weren't really talking about that at the time. But she gave us the book and said, just very gently, I think this might help. And to myself and my mother and my sister. And it really did provide a tremendous amount, it resonated for whatever reason, sometimes you don't always understand what's going on, but there was a lot of peace brought to all 3 of us from the book. And so much so that we used to buy a whole bunch of copies, and we would just, anytime someone lost someone dear to them, we would just share the book here, just gently, just see if anything in here helps. It was a beautiful book.
And you met her at some point, didn't you?
We did. We went to see her speak, and it was kind of an interesting way that this unfolded. We went to hear her speak, and it was a very large audience, full room. And we were hoping that we could have a few words with her and just let her know how much her book had helped us. But the room was so big and she was so busy. So we're like, well, we guess, it was lovely to see her, but we were pretty sure we weren't going to be able to meet her. So we were sitting out in the lobby, just chit-chatting and alone. And who walks out of the ladies' room but Betty Eady? And so we were actually able to meet her and really just express our gratitude for her work and her courage in speaking about it. Because in those days, these topics were not so prevalent, and it took a lot of courage to come forward like she did at that time, but it helped so many of us.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Do you I've lost my thread there. You became a medium yourself, didn't you?
I did. At the time, well, I guess I was, at the time I didn't realize that I had that ability. That came later on. And again, it was all sort of divinely led, synchronistically occurring. I didn't plan any of this. I wasn't, oh, I'm going to become a medium now. Not at all. And in fact, it was the opposite. I just thought, oh, that's really cool. I would, it's wonderful there are people out there like that. But I never thought, oh, I can do that at all. So it's kind of interesting that, that sort of appeared in my life.
So when you were looking back and, coming up with this book to put on your list, did you feel at all that somehow, there was a signal in that book that perhaps her book opened up something in you that made that possible?
I think so. I believe now that our soul is guiding us the whole time. I also really believe, what Carolyn Mace talks about, our sacred contract, and that we do design most of our lives ahead of time. So if, we're at least sensitive enough, we're getting guides and little nudges here and there to sort of keep us on track and remind us of why we're really here. So I definitely think that her book and her work and her, served that purpose for us. So yeah, for sure.
Mm. Was she as you expected her to be?
She was beautiful. She was very humble, kind to us. I mean, it was just a brief encounter, but yeah, it was lovely to meet her and to thank her. Yeah.
So book number 4, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Maya Angelou, published in 1969. What made you read this book?
I can't remember. I just, stumbled upon her. She was everywhere too at that point. So maybe it was on Oprah. I'm not sure. But I just remember, I think I listened to it first, just being my heart open. There was just something so powerful that I could also relate to with regard to her. My family upbringing, it was, not even close to hers, but it was difficult. And so, again, inspired by how much she could really find her truth and her power amidst all of the challenge. It was just very, very inspiring to me. And
several times, haven't you?
Yeah. I just love her anyway. She just speaks to my heart and that sense of divine feminine power. And I actually got to see it in action with her towards the end of her life. And again, just I feel, synchronistically led, but this really changed my life, seeing this. So what happened was a friend of mine from church who sings at our church was singing for her. She was backing her up or opening her show in Boston. So a bunch of us went, and Maya was probably well into her 80s at this point. And she was having difficulty with her hips. So, and I mentioned that for a reason. So our friend sings, beautiful opening, and she sits down on the front row. And then Dr. Angelou comes out onto the stage with a walker. Slowly, very gently. She was obviously physically, a little feeble. I don't even want to use that word, but she was in a delicate condition, let's just say, physically. So she starts to tell her story that's depicted in the book. And every time she overcame the difficult part, or someone told her, no, you can't do that because, XYZ, you're a woman, you're Black, she would break out into song. And the song was, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And her voice boomed from this delicate body, and it would boom. I mean, there was no, so that was one piece. And I'm pretty sure everyone would have goosebumps. And you could feel the room shift. She owned that room. She owned her power. So about 15 minutes into it, all of a sudden we hear yelling and screaming from the head of the auditorium. And we're like, what's going on and what's happening? And we hear, Dr. Angelou, Dr. Angelou. So the room starts to buzz and people start getting nervous. And you know how that is. It could be a scene. All of a sudden, Dr. Angelo says, people, there's a gentleman in the front row who is having a heart attack or some sort of medical issue. I want everyone to sit down. Is there a doctor and a nurse in the room? Come forward, please. The whole room sat down, quieted, sat down. And it turned out it was my friend's father-in-law who was having the medical issue. And so maybe a minute, if even that, a couple of doctors, nurses came forward. My friend starts yelling, oh my God. She says, Nicole, are you a doctor or nurse? No, ma'am. Sit down. So she did. You could have heard a pin drop. They come, they usher the gentleman out and out the door, and it was so quiet, you could hear the door clicking. That's how much of command of the room she had. We hear the door click, and she says, now where was I? She picked right up where she left off. That to me was a true demonstration of the divine feminine. It was beautiful.
I mean, there's so many wonderful quotes that have gone on record from her books and talks. And the one that I love, to do with books is the one about, the pain of holding an untold story inside you. I would think that mindset, her telling her stories, were her way of, dissolving that pain.
Yeah, I would imagine. And also empowering herself, not giving the power over to the story or the perpetrators
Exactly.
And here she was. I'm going to demonstrate to you.
Yeah. Book number 5 is a book that opened the door to your psychic potential. Develop Your Psychic Skills by Enid Hoffman, published in 1981.
Yeah, and here again, it wasn't necessarily the book itself, but the book was a signpost. And when I looked back, sort of that synchronicity, that common thread. So back at the time when we were finding Betty Edie, my sister was getting involved with a gentleman whose sister was a psychic. And I was highly skeptical. So I was not one of these people who was raised in this or believed in it or even trusted it. So she started getting involved in some of these folks, and I was sort of, like I said, skeptical. And I guess when I found that book in a neighbor's yard sale, I just grabbed it, not because I thought, oh, I'm going to study this because I'm psychic. I just said, I want to learn more about how somebody becomes psychic. What is this anyway? And, so on and so forth. So that's why I grabbed it, but I never read it. And I tucked it away in a box because we moved shortly thereafter from South Florida up to Boston. And then about 7 years total, I was found myself in a Waldorf school with my children. And someone told me to, hey, Sarah's hosting a drumming circle. So I said, oh, great. I've always wanted to try that. So I showed up for this, what I thought was a drumming circle. And it turned out it was a psychic development circle. So I'm so sorry. I don't mean to bother you. She said, sit down. You'll be fine. And she said, well, we're going to teach you how to meditate. It's as if she knew what I needed. And I said, well, if you can show me how to shut my head off, just what I was saying at the time, I'll happily sit here and mind my own business. I mean, good for all of you, but thank you for that gift. So I started sitting through the class, and I said, I think I have a book that, talks about all of the things that you're teaching here. So I went home and dug through the boxes that I still hadn't unpacked from my trip and discovered this book that's on the list. Brought it to class the next week, and she said, yes, that's my program. I helped co-write the book. You can't make that stuff up. But
no, you can't. The synchronicities, don't you just love them? Book number 6, another one that consistently appears in the top 10, The 4 Agreements, A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom by Don Miguel Ruiz, published in 1997.
The book is such a treasure. It really is. Um, yeah. It's one of those books I find I want to highlight every word in it, in every sentence. I'm actually teaching it right now with one of my Courageous Souls Rising group. We practice it, though. We don't reread it, but then we apply it. And it's so fun to see. We go week by week, and it's like, okay, how are you doing with being impeccable with your word? I can't even tell you how many times I've gone through it, still stumble.
Yeah.
It's simple, but not easy, but it's such a beautiful map towards, human mastery, I believe. Wonderful, wonderful gift to the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that, it is a wonderful book, and that it can be encapsulated in just 4 lines, because that's the essence. And this is, a law to live by.
Yeah.
Those 4 lines alone.
That's so beautifully put. I believe it. I really feel like this should be a standard,
Oh,
offering in every school.
me too.
Children, imagine children being raised understanding this. We actually had an experience here. I'm in Boston, so we're New England's Patriots fans. And Tom Brady, some people might have heard of, was a big deal here. And he also was on a spiritual path himself. And at one point, he was reading and working with this book and kind of made it well known or better known. And a lot of the kids started picking it up. My son was one of them. So, it was a wonderful experience. But the funny story is my son said, okay, so I'm going to take every week, I'm going to take one agreement a week. And if I mess up, I'm going to go back to the beginning. So I checked in. He's like, it's pretty simple. So I checked in, how's it going? He's like, well, I haven't got past that first agreement. He goes, it seems so simple, but.
Yep.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Book number 7, The Surrender Experiment, My Journey into Life's Perfection, by Michael Singer, published in 2015.
Yeah. Yeah. So I discovered this when he was on Oprah, apparently his first public interview. That was really just an extremely helpful text for me. And the fact that, so he wrote Untethered Soul first, and then this Surrender Experiment came out afterwards. And just for folks listening, if you haven't read it, the Surrender Experiment is his story and how he actually uses surrender in meditation and how he uses it to overcome and get into flow and all of that. And, there's a proof that it does work. And then the Untethered Soul is really sort of the how to, because that was, how do you actually do this? How do you live it? But the two together, I think, are really, really great. And so it was good for me to know somebody's already done this. They figured out a way, and he faced tremendous challenge. And still, because oftentimes, and I know this, I'm speaking for myself, but, also I've seen it in clients. We get into a tough situation. I call it, we're on our knees. We can't figure it out. How are we going to do this? And oftentimes we'll sort of double down on the intellect or on what's worked before, or, fear, doubt, confusion, all the things that we think are actually going to help. Work harder, more pressure. Meditation can wait. Our spiritual practices can wait when I dig myself out of this hole. And, I think we're sort of wired that way. This is a completely different approach to those kind of situations. And in fact, it turns it on its ear. You're on your knees, you're stuck. Go meditate for a few minutes. See what you decide to do then. See what wisdom and guidance comes to you then. See what you can open yourself up to with regard to these divine gifts. So when I found myself on my knees through a very difficult period in my life, divorce, and a very difficult illness with Lyme, which left me with some facial paralysis. It was 2008 and 2009, so we know what happened with the economy there. It was a perfect storm. So, and it took a while to move through it. So when I discovered his book, it really just helped deepen my practice, and reassure me that it was the way to go. And of course, then the universe showed me that too. So I highly recommend it. It's beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful work.
indeed. Well, book number 8, I have to tell you, because I've only recently been doing a calculation. This is the number 1 recommended book for the past 5 years that the No BS Spiritual Book Club has been going. So many people have found so much in this book that it's topped their lists. Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, published in 1946.
Yeah, I understand why that is so. I'm sort of a latecomer to Yogananda and his work, which sort of makes me laugh when I think about how I actually did learn about him. It was via some plaques in the Biltmore Hotel while staying there on a business trip. That is where he passed away, and after having a conversation or a talk with his some leaders from India and leaders from the U.S., which had been his long-held dream. I didn't know any of that at the time. I actually learned it at the Biltmore Hotel, and that set me on a sort of synchronistic journey towards Yogananda. But even his story, everything that we've talked about here, his story also points to that. I mean, if you read about how he accomplished what he accomplished against all odds, it's pretty incredible. I mean, he barely spoke English when he came here. He landed in Boston, as many people know, and started off here and barely spoke any English. And his guides and his spiritual teachers were telling him, you need to go and you need to go now. We know it makes zero sense, but you need to trust and you're going to do this. And people are going to probably not be interested at all, but they were. And what was so interesting to me is, social media now, we know how to gather people. We know how to find people. But back in those days, he was filling theaters, thousands of people at a time. They didn't, they weren't used to seeing someone who looked like him or sounded like him or were talking the things that he was talking, but yet they were showing up and they were staying. And that's just really something.
Yeah, I mean, he really is a one-off.
Yeah. Such a gift.
Book number 9, Discover Your Purpose. How to use the 5 life purpose profiles to unlock your hidden potential and live the life you were meant to live, by Rhys Thomas, published in 2015. 5 life purpose profiles. That's a new one on me.
Yeah. So, it follows along with everything we're talking here, right? About finding your why, finding your life purpose, how important that is. And that really has been sort of my lifelong journey of understanding that, trying to discover what mine was, teaching and supporting others and trying to find theirs. Now, at this point in my life, I believe it beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's so important for us to find it and to live it. And not just for our own happiness, but for everyone in our wake and the world. Because now we understand, science proves, what happens when we enter the field and we raise our frequency. And for my money, living our life's purpose is about the highest, and I say, walking our soul's path, aligned with our soul, is about the highest frequency we can hold and the highest level of happiness. And as we know, happy people make people happy. And as Louise Hay tells us, wounded people wound people. And so what would the world look like if more of us were living our life's purpose? So I discovered Reef's work at a point when I felt like, I'm not quite there. I've been, and I feel like this is what happens, right? I like the proverbial onion. We just keep peeling a layer when we're ready. And I always like to mention, I trust our nervous system to let us know when it's time to peel another layer, because I know I was impatient in my journey and many of my clients are as well. Like, how come I'm not there yet? Why can't I just peel the whole onion now? I've tried that. I wouldn't recommend it. It can be a shock to the system. So anyway, I found Reese's book, and here he has a system to help us, based on ancient wisdom, to help us figure out what is our path and how are we meant to express our life's purpose energetically into the world. A lot of people think about the life's path and purpose that having to do with our job or what we do in the world. And sometimes that is an alignment, but not always. And with his work, it's starting from your energetic essence. He works with the chakra system. He works with the whole energetic body. There's a lot of quantum physics and mechanics, sound healing that he incorporates in all of his work. But this book is based on these 5 profiles, and he believes we have a primary profile and then a secondary profile. And you can take an assessment, you can figure it out. But what you'll find when you take the assessment, typically a realization that we've been living from someone else's idea of who we are, society's, idea of who we are and who we should be, back to Maya Angelou's, message, or even Yogananda's message. But what if you could show up fully aligned with your soul and live your life from that place and move towards your purpose? It's a beautiful state to be in. So I'm not saying I'm there, but part of the process. And I feel like this book is a good tool to help people with it.
Well, it's a new one on me, and I'll certainly have a look at that because, I think that one of our purposes is to know who we are.
Yeah.
And for me, things like astrology, Enneagram, numerology, all of those things, human design, gene keys, are all wonderful tools that we've been given to look inside and know more about who we are. So anything that can add to that is welcome.
And I think that, I like to use a lot of different tools and look. So I did a year studying human design and gene keys, which is beautiful. And looking for those threads between, what Reese's assessment saying and what they're saying. And I found that that's really, and then astrology too. It's powerful because also the mind is tricky, and that programming is strong and sticky. So if we can just keep looking and working and just know it's part of the process, it's part of being human, that, we can get there for sure.
So the last book on your list, number 10, Being and Vibration, Entering the New World, Joseph Rayo, also known as Beautiful Painted Arrow, and Mary Elizabeth Marlowe, published in 1993. And I have to tell you that Beautiful Painted Arrow has been coming up in conversations around me for the past 6 months.
Yeah, you and me both. So, which is why I wanted to make sure I got his book on the, on the list. What a beautiful being and teacher he's been in the world. And I, like you, just discovered him through synchronicity. And a friend of mine sent me a copy of that book that I listed there. And it just was exquisite. Even the energy in the book, you can feel it. But the beauty in the words, very much like the essence of Don Miguel Ruiz, I would say, he's of that ilk. And so, the economy of words that come through and the energy that comes through in the language is just so beautiful. And he's talking about his tradition and his upbringing and how, his people truly understood how to live in this way. And his description of it, I just was really taken by. And I found myself having to just read it in, bits and pieces. And I'd have to sit it down and sort of, be with it for a while. And at first I was like, what's going on with this? And then I started meeting more and more people like you, 6 months time, meeting all the, I studied with them. I'm a really good friend of his. And they would also say, yes, that book, I had the same experience. I would, read it for a bit. I'd be so touched by the words and the energy of it. I'd put it down and then I'd pick it up again. So the last person that I met who has been a friend of his for 40 years, we had lunch and he told me that uh, Joseph had just finished his final book and that he had sent him a case of these books, and you can't get them on Amazon apparently. And so he offered to send me a copy of the book, which he did. And I feel, very blessed to have that book.
And it's not available to the rest of us.
I don't believe it is, but maybe I encourage. It's a beautiful book. I put it in the listing at the end so folks can find the title. So if I know, our mutual friend, he'll do what he can to get the word out.
Okay, well, that's your 10 best list. Now let's talk about you. I mean, I notice something that I haven't really taken in with other people's lists is, and yet is true of all of us, is that this really demonstrates, your list for me really demonstrates your stories about them. And there's longer stories that will be on the website, but this is almost like a soul autobiography. This is the autobiography of your soul. And I guess that applies to anyone who sits down and looks at their books, and creates their list, whether they come on this show or not, is we really are looking at the autobiography of our soul. So I want to thank you for making that clear for me. It's quite a gift. But I'm curious to know, I mean, you are, as I said at the beginning in the introduction, you are, I wouldn't say a paradox, because many, we're seeing the lines blur now between mainstream world and, spiritual, etc. But, you're an expert in mindset management, growth acceleration. You're also a spiritual teacher. I mean, it seems to me that you came from a left brain field, but you brought some of that into the right brain field and created something entirely new with it. Is that accurate?
I would say it's accurate. I don't know if it's entirely new, but to the point, when we're talking about Reese's work, we all create a unique blend to bring to the world. And knowing what my profiles are, what we're describing, matches perfectly. And I used to fight it. Who am I? What am I? How am I supposed to make all this work together? And so it's been a process of acceptance and, understanding. But
was there a pivotal moment when the light went on?
In terms of my spiritual development?
Yeah.
I'll try not to cry telling this story, but because I used to, when I was learning about the psychic development in the spiritual world, I thought it was interesting, but my question always was, but why? Like, why do we need this in the world? Why? And I didn't understand the spiritual underpinning of it. And that's a complicated topic. Let's, just be honest about that too. The world of psychics and mediums, because what I've also discovered is that just because someone's highly psychic, doesn't necessarily mean they're on a spiritual path. And it's the same as a medium. So that's a very important distinction, I think, to make. But it was part of my path. So I found myself in that first class and had a few experiences there. I was seeing auras. I wasn't trying, but she was making me. I just wanted to shut my head off. I just had monkey mind times 10. So that was my whole goal. But I started to see it. And I was like, okay, great. But still, good for you people. They were all excited. I was sort of like, oh, okay. Not really sure what's happening here. But so then a couple years later, same kind of scenario, I accidentally find myself in a psychic development space. And the teacher, I think, again, I'm going to learn to meditate because I needed to really get through some stuff and quiet my mind. She looked at me and I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm in the wrong place again. She said, sit down, you'll be fine. We're going to teach you how. She knew, just like the other person knew. And they said almost the same words. So I said, okay, if you don't mind. So I did. And she taught me deeper. And it turns out their teachings were very similar. They had similar training. Although this teacher had a lot more, she had a lot of indigenous training. She had a more, anyway, fast forward, she had a school and a lot of my friends were going. And I said, well, you know, because they were all into it. I was like, well, I'm going to be in the way. She's not going to let me come. So they said, well, let's ask her. She said, of course, come. So fast forward, what really changed my mind about it was she forced me to start doing some of the work. And when I did, well, how she had us work with was to look at the chakras. We were first working with our clairvoyance, and she had us look at the chakras of the being and essentially at the soul. We were doing soul readings. And she had us actually draw them. And I had this moment of just pure awe at the beauty of the person sitting in front of me. And it makes me cry every time I say it. But I was able to then, it wasn't about, oh, your future's this. It was about, no, this is the beauty of who you are. And I was able to say this to them. And I used to just in awe say, you're so beautiful. And, you know, we would both be in tears. But in that moment is when I saw, okay, I can understand how this can be helpful. But also in the way I discovered how much I had to clear the programming, the shadow work, and the power of that. And then to be able to hold that, that light, for lack of a better way of putting it. But also it's really a fuller alignment with your soul is how I see it. And so we, you know, Tanis Hallowell, who we both know, talks about creating a soul-infused personality. And in my mind, that's the goal. That's why we're here. And then my teacher used to say, you do that and you walk it around, you're healing everyone in your wake. You don't need to do anything more. And nothing outside of you means more than that. And that's why I always believe everyone's soul purpose matters. One's not better than the other. Every single one matters.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And what a wonderful thing and such a sad situation that we have lost the ability to see the beauty in those around us. You know, because if we could, there would be no war. There would be no hatred.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting there. And I think that's why this great awakening is happening. We all have this ability and we've all lived lifetimes when we knew these truths, I believe. And I think that's what's going on now. And we're heading back to that. And more of us are coming together, which helps because it gives us the courage like Betty Eadie had or Maya Angelou had back in the day when no one was talking about these things. More and more of us are coming together in community and giving each other strength to keep moving forward in this way. It's not always easy to look at someone who feels like a threat or scary or potentially harmful as a soul, as a beautiful being. Sometimes it's, you know, the temptation is real. I want to protect myself. I want to make sure I know what I'm dealing with, you know. So it's a practice. And
so I wonder whether the lady whose workshop you walked in on by mistake, who taught you to meditate, knew in advance that what she was unleashing on the world, because you are co-founder of the Millions Meditating Project. So you now got a mission to get millions of people meditating. How are you going to do that?
Well, that's an excellent question. What I know for sure is I won't be doing it alone. I have a beautiful board that has, come together, and we're going to launch this project together. And what we're doing is we're starting off aligning with the UN Day of International Meditation, which is on December 21st, 2025. They just created this day last year in 2024. So we are aligning, first off, all the larger group of meditations and meditators around the globe. And we're going to encourage them to actually host a meditation on that day. And, then we're basically talking to everyone and anyone that we know that meditates, has a meditation community, to meditate on that day and beyond. There's going to be a lot of ramping up and teaching to folks that may never have meditated or want to go deeper with their practice. We have gathered together some of the world's best meditation teachers and communities to support this effort. And so we'll be bringing that forth and introducing them to more and more people. So that's where we are at the moment. We do have some very large meditation communities on board already. And we'll just be moving forward with that and hope that everyone who's listening will join us on that day, either whether you're home alone or joining a community in your neighborhood. We really want to encourage you to meditate on that day.
And this is open to small centres who may gather, 10, dozen people together on a weekly basis. Anyone
Absolutely.
can participate in this, yes?
Yes, absolutely. Anyone. You have 2 friends at home alone. My husband and I meditate together, almost every day. It counts. It matters. I mean, the conversation that we've had prior to, I think, really points to at least how I believe the difference that it can make in the world. So, yes, we're absolutely encouraging everyone. We've been talking to some people with interesting connections to the football players, folks that you might not think actually meditate. Young children, we are gathering groups that are meditating with young children. So all ages, all practices, all faiths, we're connecting around this beautiful practice of meditation.
You're also the founder of Courageous Souls Rising Academy. Tell me a little bit about that.
So that came out of my own life's work. And what we do, it's a year-long program. And what we do is connect with the truth of who they are. We help them figure out using a lot of the assessment tools that we talked about here and I talk about elsewhere, to help them really start with an intellectual understanding of who are you? Why did what did you come here to express? Does that align with what you're doing? If not, how can we bring more of that alignment into your life? And we practice living into that and playing into it. And I design it in such a way that you're going to bump into yourself, I call it, right? So those blocks. But it's very difficult to do that from a theoretical place. So I believe we set the goal, we get as much understanding as we possibly can, and then we live our lives, whether it's, and I work with a lot of entrepreneurs because that is my original background. So I get them. And entrepreneurs, we're a different sort of being, right? And so it's great to be around other entrepreneurs. So we usually are working in their business, which I love to say is the greatest spiritual journey of all, because nothing will bring you up against yourself faster than being in business. And so for me, I see that as a gift, because then we know where the block is. We know, which tools we need to use to remove the blocks, to create further alignment with the soul. So that's the crux of the academy. There's small groups. So you really develop a beautiful friendship soul group. And, these women have seen each other through some of the most harrowing times, but they've been able to also, because of the support of the group, been able to learn about themselves, choose perhaps more of a path aligned with what Michael Singer's approach might be, or Don Miguel's approach might be. And so it gives them an opportunity to actually practice it. The other thing that it does too, I just wanted to say, because I'd like to encourage people to do this. When you start to discover who you really are and who you are in your power, I really want to encourage people to practice it in a safe place, because sometimes we discover it, but then we can't find that safe place to actually practice it. And sometimes it takes some practice, right? Because we've had this programming from beyond the beyond. I mean, we take a lot of this on generationally, as we know. So it takes a bit. So it's not going to be comfortable at first when you show up to a bunch of people who are used to you playing small. And suddenly you're going to show up like Maya Angelou and claim your space and your voice. And they're like, who is this person? there's a lot of pushback that happens. So a big part of what we do in the program is encourage them to practice using their voice in their power in this way. And we're cheering them on and we're saying, more, please. So that when it goes out to the real world, they're so comfortable in this new skin that it's, it'll stick more often than not. So
there's a saying that, if you want someone to do something, to organize something, to build something, give the job to somebody who is always busy. It strikes me that you are the kind of person that is very dynamic and always building something new. What is lighting you up right now? What do you want to build?
Well, that is true about me. I do say that the things that light me up are about bringing people home to themselves and to each other. And that's always been the thread, and helping them love themselves more and each other. And when I look at my own life, that's what I had to learn, being born into a dysfunctional family where no one knew how to love themselves or get along or love each other. Right. And so we move forward. And so the Millions Meditating Project is one of the things that is really lighting me up. Again, because I get to work with so many incredible, beautiful spiritual leaders in the world, which really has just been such an honor, and learning from each of them and their different traditions. I also feel that it's a way that we can bring people together in community. We're helping them, as I always say, find your people, find your path. Because we know if they find their community, like we were just talking about, the chances of them continuing on their path is going to be far greater. And I just personally know that was the case for me. And all the gifts that came from being on that path, it was my wish for everyone. A couple of the other things that are lighting me up that I'm working on is, I don't know if we can announce it here, but helping you with your No BS book clubs, the actual meetings. I'm talking to some folks in the spiritual communities in my area because the whole world right now, I feel, and I think you can agree with this, really needs community and are really searching for this. And,
Yes.
I've incorporated a book clubs sort of thing in my Courageous Souls work. And I see the benefits of it. We're all busy. We all have book club, books on our shelves. Do we read them? And more importantly, do we apply them? So when you launched this, I just thought, what a beautiful way to bring people together, to help them be inspired by these beautiful words and to meet each other, really, to meet each other and create these beautiful bonds. It helps the local community centers also, who sometimes struggle with finding people to come into their centers. So this way we can help them find that. There's just so many wins to it. And I just think it's a beautiful,
And
beautiful
it's
project.
it feels like such a simple thing,
Yeah.
People are waking up, they're looking for their tribe, they're looking for the books that are going to help them, with their personal growth and development, but they don't know who to talk to. Quite often the family isn't interested.
Yeah.
Just to start a book club in your village, in your town, in your city, and, keep it small and have thousands of them around the world.
Yeah.
That's my dream. And I'm grateful to you for stepping forward and saying, I want to be amongst the first to put this in operation. I've been running a book club in my home for 6 months just as a test. And in fact, we're meeting tonight. And it has been an amazing success, and it's something that anybody could do. If they have the interest, all they have to do is contact us. We'll help them. So thank you for your support in doing this, getting it off the ground. I would like to see 1 million book clubs around the world, that people just meet and read and grow and care about one another and find their purposes together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will join you in that vision.
Thank you. Thank you. So if anyone's interested in starting one, you can write to me. We are building a new website. We're getting it ready for launching this. It has to be a lot more robust than what we've currently got. So it won't actually start for a couple of months yet, but you can register your interest by writing to me. And I think anybody on our list knows how to reach me. And I think it's also on YouTube as well, my email address. But we're almost out of time. I need to ask you a question that we ask all our guests. And that is, you probably know this one. Steve Jobs famously gave every attendee at his memorial a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi. So it's obviously top of his list. What book would you want to pass on to your guests at your memorial?
I think I would go with the Four Agreements.
The Four Agreements.
Yeah, because it's something that you can, well, I was going to say easily apply, but you can understand and readily start to practice. And I truly believe if we could each sort of at least begin to master those Four Agreements, the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
Well, that would be the workbook I would choose. For its simplicity, its applicability, and its power.
It would be on my list of books to offer them. I'd probably end up giving everybody a crate full of books.
I know, it's
I
hard
couldn't choose.
Which book would you choose, though? If you had to pick one, which would you pick?
I don't know, because you really don't know, who's going to be there and where their head is at and what stage they're at. I think the Four Agreements is a good choice because it's so down to earth. It's so practical that somebody, regardless of religion, belief, whatever, it's a useful book. Books like The Alchemist and I think Autobiography of a Yogi, everybody should read, but not everybody's going to be drawn to it. But I think, that is a really good choice that you've made there. I think anyone would take that book away and probably want to read it.
Hopefully. Yeah. I'll start buying them up now.
Yeah. Lauren Lamore, thank you for adding your 10 best list of spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. We are really grateful for your participation in this.
Thank you, Sandie. It's been wonderful spending time with you.
You too. And if you want to know more about Lauren's work and services, you can visit her website at lifevisionary.com. Now, before we go, what can we learn from Lauren's 10 best list? For me, it's this. The books that touch us deeply, they're much more than just titles. They are mirrors of moments, shifts in perspective, and turning points on the journey to wholeness. From the poetry of Khalil Gibran to the vibrations of Joseph Rael, from Maya Angelou's fierce grace to Michael Singer's surrender. Lauren's list reminds us that spiritual awakening doesn't follow a straight line. It weaves through grief, courage, intuition, purpose, and sometimes unexpected synchronicity. So here's something to reflect on. What are the books or even the sentences that have stayed with you long after you closed the cover? What truths have waited patiently for you to grow into them? And what messages might still be whispering to you from the pages of the next book you're meant to find? As Lauren's journey shows us, the books we're drawn to often reflect the lives that we're here to live. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Lauren Lamore.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.